I might get y'all to break up just a little bit. Like if you 4 guys want to hang out, or you 5, that's fine. Y'all can be a group this morning. Thank you. I'll stand. I'm also going to walk around a lot. So, if this front row wants to be a group, that's fine. If the second row wants to be a group, that's fine. Let me go ahead and give out these verses. I'm only going to do this once. Can y'all pay attention? Sister Shelley, Genesis 1:27. Stacy, Colossians 3:10. Josh, Ephesians 4:24. Priscilla, Revelation 22:4. If y'all see these, I'm on number 1 under the Christian tree. Rebecca, Genesis 9:6. Ian, 1 Corinthians 10:13. Brother Jeffrey, I'm going to give you 3 because I think I'm going to run out. So do Matthew 6:13 and 26:41. Toomey, do you mind reading?
Sure.
James 1:13-15. Brother, Hebrews 4:15. CK, Galatians 5:16 and 17. Sister Meow, Ecclesiastes 4:9-12. Rose, Matthew 22:21. Lay, Daniel 2:21. Do you see it there? Okay. Wilson, James 1:14-15. Sam, Galatians 5:22-23. Jabez, Proverbs 27:6. Caleb, Ecclesiastes 7:5. Caleb, go ahead and do both of those. Psalm 141:5. Josiah, do Ecclesiastes 3:11. Also do Micah 6:6-8. And then raise your hand if you want to volunteer for a few more. Stacy, Revelation 20:11-15. Anybody else? Shelley, Isaiah 32:22. Can I get about, okay, to me, 2 Corinthians 5:10, Romans 2:16, Sister Lay, 2 Corinthians 9:8, and, 2 Corinthians 9:8, and go ahead and do John 10:10 if you would. Yes. And I think that's enough. We can get through that at the end. I know that's a lot. We're going to try, if you remembered, God bless us all. This one is verse heavy today. All right, let's get started. For those of you who know, we've been going through Christian Worldview. We are over the halfway part with this session. I think there are 24, and so we're on the back half. And this is what we're calling the 5th fruit of worldview, and it's psychology. The question being, how does God define humanity? How does God define humanity? We will spend 2 weeks on this, today and next week, looking at psychology, and a little bit differently. All of these are a little bit different based on the topic. But today we're going to ask some key questions, and then I want you to break up into groups again, and I want everybody to, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to, again, focus on naturalism and Christianity. We're going to leave transcendentalism out simply because it's not as necessary for who we are in the West, right? You will run into transcendentalists on the idea of philosophy, but it's going to be pretty easy, I think, for you to combat it and dismiss it. Okay? I just don't think transcendentalists on the issue of psychology have a lot to say. Naturalists, however, do have a lot to say on psychology. Okay? So again, for this one, we're only going to focus on naturalism and Christianity, not so much transcendentalism. If you see under naturalism and then under Christianity, you see those 5 bullet points. We did line them up. So today, if you want to look at the first one under naturalism, then if you go to the first one under Christianity, those are in conversations with each other. Okay? So if you go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, you will see the conversation that those worldviews are having with each other. All right, let's ask a couple of key questions and then I'll break us up. Key questions of psychology. What does it mean to be human? And what do you think the three trees would say, just from your own background? What do you think a transcendental? Let's talk about transcendentalism for just a second. What do you think a transcendentalist would say? What does it mean to be human? Just think big picture. It's a curse to be human? Why do you say that?
Because a lot of transcendentalists.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of Wilson, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm sort of agreeing with you. I might use the word humanity, this life is a test. I might say it's a test. Transcendentalists will talk about this life just being a curse, a test, a suffering. It's a suffering, right? So that's more in line with what you're saying. And it's to be gotten through, right? It's meant to be gotten through. Okay? What else might we say? What else might the transcendentalists say about being human or psychology? Anybody else? Sorry?
I guess just
well, eventually, right? That's the goal. So, is a transcendentalist going to put a high value on a human life?
No, they're going to put a low value.
Yeah, they're going to put a lower value, certainly than Christianity, right? Did you have something, Josh?
I was going to say they're going to try to reject themselves and become nothing, I guess.
Yeah.
Almost non-existent.
So it's a weird thing for yes, it's a weird thing for transcendentalists, right? Because they either think too little of themselves or they think way too highly of themselves. There's a reason why the West has always been in love with Buddhism and Hinduism. Anybody want to guess why the West, why Europe and America especially, have always been in love with Buddhism and Hinduism? You want to guess? Anybody? Because there's no one to tell you no. There's no moral rule, there's no moral lawgiver, and there's no moral rule book to tell you you can't do anything. You get to be religious without being told no. And the West eats that up. The West loves the idea that you can be spiritual and not have to answer to anybody. Doesn't that sound like the West? Freedom. You mean I can be free to do what I want and be religious? Sign me up. Sign me up for that. You mean I get to be spiritual and I don't have to answer to anybody? Yeah. And we've done that for hundreds of years. The West has gone through waves of just falling in love with Eastern faith. Just go back 200 years. Herman Melville, Walt Whitman, Emerson, Thoreau, they were called the Transcendentalist poets. These great American authors, writers, poets, novelists were called transcendental writers. Right? So America does this, the West does this in waves. We're kind of drawn to it. So transcendentalism either thinks too lowly of humans, you don't really matter and it's all going to be over soon, or, hey, I might be God. Look at me. Look what I can do. So it's this weird push-pull where you're going to the poles. Okay. Which worldview makes the best observations about what it means to be human? Which worldview makes the best observations about what it means to be human? Which one do you think I'm going to say? Christianity. Why? Let's cut to it. Huh? Well, yeah, but what? I'm a preacher because I believe it. That's how that works. I don't believe it because I'm a preacher. I'm a preacher because I believe it. I sure will. Yeah, the question was, which worldview makes the best observations about what it means to be human? Which of the three worldviews gets the human condition most accurately? Christianity. Why? Why Christianity?
Because in the beginning we're humans and we're created from dust, and then when sin came upon, because we disobeyed, we faced trials and errors, but the good news is that Jesus, God the Son, came onto this earth where he faced the same temptations as we do, yet he was perfect and found guiltless.
Okay. Good. Jeffrey.
I'd say the same thing that Stacy said in different words.
Please.
The
And I'm going to say it a third time in my word, say the same thing.
naturalist worldview can't say that there's something wrong with the world because there's no criteria
Correct.
outside of the world. But as Christians, we can see that there's sin and death and things are wrong. But then if you go to the transcendentalist worldview, again, there's nothing to strive for. There's no reason to think that our soul is precious, and yet we feel like it is.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's good. I like that. Did you hear the last thing he said? He said in transcendentalism, they teach that your soul is not precious, yet Brother Jeffrey said, we intuit that it is. Don't you think that your soul is precious?
It has value.
Yeah, it has value, right? I think that's good. Okay, so let me say it a third way. Just say the same thing as the both of y'all just said. Naturalists love to say that the great problem for Christianity is suffering. I say that they're not thinking that through. Suffering is a greater problem for naturalists than it is for Christians. I have Jesus on my side who says, follow me, and then shows me how suffering can be profound. Jesus shows me how suffering can have meaning. Jesus shows me how suffering can literally make me a better human being. Everything about suffering, once it is wrapped up in the person of Jesus Christ, makes perfect sense. So when naturalists say things like, well, you know, why would God allow a baby to have cancer? Time out. If you're a naturalist and there is no God, why do you care that anybody has cancer? You need to pick a lane. Either suffering has value and meaning, ergo, comma, objective reality, God, or it doesn't, so why do you care? So they need to pick a lane, right? Suffering is the great problem of Christianity. Not really. Suffering is the great problem of naturalism. If naturalism is real and there is no God, why should anybody care about anybody at any point, at any given time, in any capacity? And here's the reality. These naturalists saying this, they're not going to study cancer and save the planet. It's generally people of faith doing that. I mean, I've made this point many times before, but generally, if you want to find out who's giving in a society, it's people of faith. Giving their time, giving their money, giving their treasure, giving their hearts, giving their lives, giving their communities. They don't have time to be online banging out controversies and arguments. They're too busy giving their lives. But this idea so the human existence and suffering makes more sense in a Christian worldview than it does in a naturalist worldview or in a transcendentalist worldview. There's too much there for us to keep going. I got to keep moving. Where do we get our answers to problems? What are our standards for care and for health? These are all questions that psychologists try to understand. What is the foundation for morality, health, sickness, acceptable and unacceptable behavior in an individual and in a society? What is the goal of psychological health? What is the best way to navigate emotions, thoughts, pain, suffering, comfort, pleasure, loss, death? The human condition is terminal. Remember, you will die. Memento mori. Humans are born, humans live, humans die. What does it mean to be human? These are the questions that psychology seeks to answer. The problem with modern psychology is, what do you think modern psychology is built on? Which of the three major worldviews do you think modern psychology is built on? Naturalism. From beginning to end, front to back. And so, in my humble estimation, they are going to have limited answers. All right. Any questions before we get started breaking up into groups? Any questions? I did that intro kind of quickly. Let's break up into these groups, like first table, second table, third table, and walk through Now, let me say this about Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, considered to be the father of modern psychoanalysis, considered to be the granddaddy of modern psychology. Even though much of what he said and taught and believed, much of it has been discredited, the foundational basis is still there. Most of you, I'm curious, those of you who've already gone through college, raise your hand if you had a course on Sigmund Freud. At some point you studied Sigmund Freud. Raise your hand. A couple of you. You didn't? Math guy, right?
No, but I had a psychology class and my dad taught it and he didn't like Freud.
There, well, yeah. But most of you, here's what I'm saying. Most of you in this room will study Freud at some point. Most of you will study Freud at some point. You'll study a lot of these principles. I like this summary of his 5 beliefs on humanity. This is a good summary of his psychological teaching. So these aren't gotchas. These aren't meant to like catch him. They're not twisting his words. The man wrote a lot, right? And so this is just a really good summary. I did not come up with it. I just like it. But take these 5 statements, summaries of his belief on humanity, then apply them to the Christian response, and let's do that as a group. And then let's meet back, okay? Get into groups, have that conversation, spend about 25 minutes. Hey, sister. Good morning.
And then the ego is the thing that balances both of them out and stuff, like things like that. But he was the most comprehensive out of all of them. But it doesn't mean that a couple of his things were thrown out there. That's all I know.
It's kind of like, I know this is a slightly different example. I think it's John Dalton's original model of atomic theory or whatever. It was not accurate. It wasn't accurate. However, because something isn't accurate doesn't mean it's completely useless, because that essentially
Yeah, exactly. Like
was the basis
some, with science, you're building.
Y'all are going to run out of time if y'all don't get after this.
So let's start on number 1. Who wants to read it?
Yeah, human beings are animals. They're clever, creative, and adaptable animals. Their instinctive drives for pleasure, especially sexual, and aggression have not and probably never will be eliminated.
And number 1 under the Christianity tree.
Humans are image bearers of the God. But also, human beings have desires and natures, but also wills and duties.
The first Sigmund Freud's first point implies that we have no purpose. We are just here to fulfill the intent.
Human beings are animals.
I would start with the most obvious thing, that he called us animals. I mean, I understand Darwin would say the same thing, but do you understand that, like, 3 of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century all said the same thing, that humans are just low, right? Marx, Freud, Darwin are all saying, right? And then, like, all 3 of those beliefs ushered in the 20th century, in which humans killed more of each other than we'd ever thought about killing before. Hundreds of millions. We killed hundreds of millions of each other within 50 years. Within 50 years. I mean, I would start. I mean, like, I know most of you have been trained either in public schools or preparatory schools. Do you really believe that humans are animals? Do you believe that? You don't have. If you do, I don't. Right? Like, I don't, and it changes the way I treat people. But Freud does. Freud thinks that I'm just sniffing around and figuring stuff out, and like, that looks hot, I'm gonna take that. That one, she's ugly, she's not. So I'm gonna go for that.
What's up with this? The idea that aggression will stay around. What's going on with that?
Freud made the case that humans are incapable of getting over aggression.
So is kind of aggression is our baseline kind of thing?
No matter how much we stack morality and stack things on top of that, at the very bottom always lies the drive for pleasure and aggression. That will be there as long as we, for example, go 4,000 years into the future. No matter how much we've changed, that will still be in place.
Y'all should read some of those scriptures too.
Was Freud disillusioned by, or not disillusioned, did he come up with a lot of things during World War I?
He was, he was turn of the century. So, he lived through the 40s?
It says he died in 1939.
There you go.
Right before World War II.
But he saw it coming, and he was a Jew. Freud was a Jew. German, Austrian, German. Also didn't believe in anything. Sister Lay, do you mind maybe going back to that back group? I didn't ask one of y'all today, but do you mind? I think they could probably use a little adult help.
Two are better than one because they have a good time with their labor. Either we falls down and help the other up. But pity anyone.
Thank you, Sister Lay.
Yeah. So we would say the one that tells us what you said, like, we have the opportunity to, like, fulfill being in the image of God. Yeah, but it's our free will to choose that or to live like an animal, I guess.
So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God. The link to the third one is Worldview for expectation description of being human. It's also linked to that. Then the father
Other people that have people with a higher
Yeah, we can. I was going to see if we had Colossians 3:10.
Oh, Colossians. You have Colossians.
Okay. What?
She has Colossians.
Okay. Or whichever one. What does it say?
You have to conform. Right, yeah.
So Colossians 3:10 says, and of your old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator.
again saying that we could live a glorious life, like and we're created in the image of God, and we could live a life.
Yeah. I guess we could put that as the answer for 3 and 4, really, because 3 and 4 says.
A little bit different, okay. But the purpose may be the same. Yeah.
I would say this, if you compare those 5 and down below Christian trees, simple. For the Freud, he pretty much described as a human being, like an animal, kind of like explain.
Yeah, and also
the facts. We
try
eat,
to
we sleep, we drink.
yeah.
Everything is just like an animal.
Yeah, also make
It's just a fact, but when
Yeah.
you look, the Christianity is more deep dived in.
Yeah.
Everything is not just the animal basic daily needs only, but the more meaningful. You do good because not just you want it to become a good, but the more meaningful is you go back to the Bible is we love to, even though we don't want it, but we would like to do because we would like to use this way to honor God, or we call ourselves as a follower. So that's compare. That's 2 different viewpoints. It's just kind of like a fact. We do that, but why we do that, I don't know. But if you go back to the Christianity, is we are not just we go do it, but a lot of the meaning behind the scene and a lot of things we learn being taught. Then it's that is all the way beyond the animal, because animal wouldn't do that, right? So that's
I think it's just like a fruit have a excuse for human, why human behave like that. So his theory is more kind of more passive, not like the one shown here in Christian tree. It's more active, I guess. It's more like spontaneous, automatic. And but the one shown in the fruit is like kind of what we should do that to follow the regulation in the society. But sometimes may not be from our really, inside of heart. Just want to follow the rule, I guess. Yeah,
That's it. What I'm about to say, I don't think it's disagreeing, but it might be a different thing to think about. I've actually studied Freud much more than I wanted to. I was in a study. I was in a field where I had to study. Freud had two disciples. One was Lacan. One was Jung. Carl Jung has an entire school of thought. The other one, Jacques Lacan, had another. So Freud had two great disciples, and I was trained under Lacan. Really, I did not desire to do that. I did not choose to do that, but that's what happened. I might say, I think what Freud would say is there were very little oughts or shoulds in psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is not really about what you ought to do. It's more about what you actually do. And Freud didn't really care what you did. Freud didn't care if you were moral or immoral. He didn't care if you did good or bad. He didn't care if you lived a valuable life or an invaluable. He didn't really care. He just would identify what you were doing, and he would make no judgments about what you were doing. I actually, as a person, I find that has a little value, right? If all you're doing is identifying what humans do, what are you saying at the end of the day? Now what? Right? Now what? And so does that make sense?
Yeah.
So he talked about society, but he didn't really care about society. It wasn't like, I'm trying to make society better. It was just, here's how society is.
It's kind of like explain the way.
Yeah, explanation. Yeah. But he would say there's no right or wrong, right? He would say there's no right or wrong. So so there's a famous quote. This is a Greek quote. It's been around a long time. Nothing human is alien to me. Nothing human is alien to me. That's a profoundly perverse quote if you really spend time with it. Because child molester, are there child molesters who are human? Are there human child molesters? Right? Are there rapists? Are there murderers? Are there people who've killed their parents, their wives, their children? That quote says, nothing human is foreign to me. Nothing human is alien to me. So
yeah, I think that could also reflect to the Bible says from the old timer compare right now, everything's the same. He just
right. Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with that.
But psychologists use
new terms.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
In a way, it's a kind of more honest perspective, though.
Which one?
That sort of rejection of kind of moral absolutes, because that's sort of
consistent within its, yeah.
Exactly, whereas you have people who are atheistic and then still they argue for
morality. Exactly.
I was just curious, when he's talking about animal, was he living before or after Darwin? At that point, were the views, was he influenced by evolution?
I would say Darwin influenced him. Yeah, Darwin would have been what, 1800s, and then Freud would be late 1800s, going into the 1900s. I said this at this other group, but actually 3 of the great thinkers of the 19th century have shaped the world incredibly, which would be Marx, Freud, and Darwin. A political scientist, a psychologist, and a scientist, and they were all naturalists, and they shaped the world far beyond what.
I will add one more.
Sure.
Adam Smith.
Adam Smith, the economics, yeah. I mean, we could name 5 or 6 more, but those three especially.
This one I feel like directly, well, again, they all directly address each other, but number 4 really addresses number 3.
Structure of every adult's, could you read number 4?
The structure of every adult society is determined by how successfully we navigate the base stage of maturity. All people pass through infancy to early childhood. When a very young child comes to terms with his or her love,
and express that's why they need their drive in a socially acceptable way. So people who know full person and are
if the society is really bad, it could be really bad too.
Yeah.
So it's not,
Yes. Yeah, that reminds me of the sin, like the sexual sin in a different society. I mean, that's if you use the society's standard, and in some society it really looks on that, and so that's their standard of living. But for the Christianity,
Guys, 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.
Yeah.
yeah, for Christians we help each other, we lift each other up, and at the same time we hold each other accountable, and according to God's standard. And that's good.
After.
so what is naturalism?
I guess we could, the third point would be neurotic symptoms. In adults arise from a failed co-promise between their instincts and their society's demands. Neurotic individuals seek psychoanalytic counseling when the time and energy devoted to these poor co-promises hinder their ability to function as adults, that is, to be capable of work and love. It's a lot of fancy words for something that I feel like could be summed into a lot simpler terms.
Welcome to psychology.
Yeah, just fancier words to make something.
It's called psychobabble.
Psychobabble, yeah.
We have to be careful we don't do that in the church.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Pneuma babble.
Yeah.
You say pneuma and then they don't even know how to spell it. That's funny.
When the compromise break down, you need to be flexible to cycle analysis.
It's like the limits that put on our drive, our desires.
1 more minute.
Instead of having anxiety,
Even though we have
James 1:14-15.
Okay, guys, we're almost out of time. Could we maybe focus the attention back to the group as a whole? And if you've got your back facing, maybe you can turn. It won't make a big deal out of that. Stay right where you are. Just be comfortable. Let's just talk about this as a whole. I realize there's too many verses here in our limited time to finish strong, but hopefully each of you in your groups were looking at those verses. So let's do this. Do I have someone from this group in the back who would be willing to read the number 1 under naturalism, read number 1 under Christianity, and then lead us in a brief discussion on that? Somebody in the back? Go ahead. Nice and loud, okay?
Human beings are animals. They are clever, creative, and adaptable animals, but their instinctive drives for pleasure, especially sexual aggression, have not and probably never will be eliminated. And then for the Christian tree, human beings are image bearers of the divine. Human beings have desires and natures, but also wills and duties.
Okay. Can you say something about those two?
So what we said is, firstly, Christian worldview implies that humans are divine beings, or are image bearers of the divine.
Implies or states?
States.
Yeah. Okay, anything else there, Wilson?
So another thing we pointed out is Freud says that we have instinctive drives for pleasure and aggression that cannot be eliminated under any circumstances. Whereas in number one, under the Christian truth, yes, that's true, but we also have a purpose according to God.
Someone else? Would any of the other groups like to add to what's been said about number one? Freud said we're all humans are animals. We live instinctually. We only do what we want.
I think we had talked about that we have the opportunity to live out us being made in the image of God, but whenever we start to stray away from that,
guys, y'all listen. Just because you're not talking, somebody else is.
Whenever we start to stray away from that, we become closer and closer to animals, I guess.
Okay.
It's kind of something we're talking about.
Anybody else? One of the, and I had shared this with somebody, but in all of my ministry, most of it I would say was traditional and Christ-based and biblically based, but there was 2 years of my training that was psychoanalytically based, and so being in that field and learning psychoanalytic principles from the inside out, meaning I was under someone who taught me psychoanalytically, I have to tell you, much of it I find pretty vulgar. I find it pretty debasing. And probably the one thing that on number one, this is the only thing I'll add, is that in the 2 years that I was trained, it was all the talk was not about ought or should, and it was not about what could be or what ought to be. It was all about what is. And so all of the talk was about desires, wants, and impulses, right? So the question would often be asked, what do you want? What do you want? Never was the question asked in that 2 year period. Never was the question asked, what should be done? Right? What is your duty? What is your responsibility? And a great philosopher taught me long, long ago, with great freedom comes great responsibility. I was like, one of you understood what I was doing. That was Spider-Man. Spider-Man taught me that.
I thought it was great power.
Same thing. Freedom, power, control. Right? With great power, with great freedom, with great control, with great ability comes responsibility, duty, demand. But you know where you never hear that? Psychoanalysis. You never hear that. So that is heartbreaking to me. It's not about what can be done, should be done, ought to be done. It's about what do you want? How would you like to do it? What is your desire? So that's those instinctual needs coming out, those animalistic needs. Okay, number two. Let's do this middle group. Is there one of you that would speak to number two? Sister Meow, will you take the bullet? Will you?
Number two. In order for any human animals to survive or flourish in a civilized society, these instinctive drives must be limited, that is, rechanneled, and expressed in a manner that their particular society tolerates. People who fail to pull this off end up in prison. And in the Christian faith, it says, society is a gift from God, and He orders the steps of men.
Okay, did y'all have anything to say on that?
We talked about that. I'm trying to remember what we said. I I think it was really more for us. So, in order for any human animals to flourish, Jesus came to us. So, yeah, we agreed to a degree with that. But at the same time, we talked about how it went beyond that. We talked about how we have obligations that go beyond just not ending up in prison, that we seek to do what is right, not just because we don't want to, not just because we want to avoid negative consequences, but because for Christians we have a head, and our purpose is to worship Him and to obey Him.
Good. The ultimate authority. That's good. So y'all put that in, so for the Christian worldview, y'all put it in light of like the natural authority of man, or the natural authority of God over man. That's good. I like that. Someone else to add to anything on number 2? Is Freud putting society in a very negative light or a very positive light? Negative. Christianity. Does Christianity put society in a more negative or a more positive light? More positive. It was a gift from God. It was given for the good of men. Authority is a gift. Leadership is a gift. Society is a gift. Government is a gift. And that's been affirmed all throughout Scripture. Even when it's sinful, even when it is tragic, as an institution, it has great value. Okay? So this group here do number 3.
We didn't get that part.
Okay, did anybody, can somebody else do 3? I should have asked y'all 1 or 2. Y'all should have jumped in and told me that. Let me read 3 and y'all help me out. Neurotic symptoms in adults arise from a failed compromise between their instincts and their society's demands. Neurotic individuals seek psychoanalytic counseling when the time and energy devoted to these poor compromises hinder their ability to function as adults. That is, to be capable of work and love. Josh, that's the one you were talking about, wasn't it? There it is. Number 3, sin destroys human life. Jesus restores human life. Spiritual disciplines, biblical counseling are part of restoration. Did y'all talk anything at all about number 3, Sister Lay?
Yeah. So something I kind of drew out was that number 3, the other naturalism. He uses the word instincts and the society demand, right? And so, I mean, instincts is something that we can't control. That according to him, humans can't control, and society's demand is also something we can't control. But then under the Christian tree, it says it is sin that destroyed human life. And so the contrast there is kind of that. Freud is kind of implying that you're not really in control of anything, and that you're kind of the way you're built, you're kind of just built for destruction. But in number 3, it's sin that destroys human life, and it's that we as humans chose sin over God, that we chose to kind of, destroy ourselves.
Okay, good. Someone else? Anything else? The only thing I would add on this one, number 3, is that, and I know it's a lot of big fancy words, is that neuroses, which is to say sickness of the mind, sickness of the heart, if you want to say it that way, sickness of the soul. Neuroses can come to anyone, anywhere at any time, but the solution is not to, the solution to neuroses is not to solve the environment. The solution to neuroses is the same as every other solution. If a human is not willing to look at what got him to his problems, he will never solve any of his problems. I think about this all the time. What's the original definition of sin? I think about this all the time. Original definition of sin, like the root definition of the root word. That's it. It's literally, if you imagine a bowman pulling back an arrow and letting fly, the root definition of the word sin is literally simply only to miss the mark. So if the ring is, the bullseye is here, imagine that arrow just flying wide. We have so forgotten the original definition of sin, that anytime we hear of something like neurosis sounds scientific, yes? Sin sounds religious, yes? We're saying the same thing. But the only ones who've forgotten that is us. Do you understand what I'm saying? When God describes the human condition as sinful, He's literally speaking psychoanalytically, psychologically, scientifically, philosophically. But we only hear that religiously. Does that make sense? We only hear that as, woe is me, guilt, shame. No, you missed it. You missed it. Sin, you missed it. You fell short. And so when psychologists talk about neurosis, Christians ought to be able to go, yeah, we're saying the same thing. We're saying you're not ever going to solve that on your own. You're not ever going to solve that on your own. So all the tools in your bag, all the principles in your books, you are not going to be able to solve that. I'd be curious if any of you know this. What is the end result of therapy? Can someone tell me what the end goal of therapy is? What? Well, and let me reframe the question. How long does therapy go on? How long does therapy last? 1 hour? Man, if therapy was only an hour, therapists would need a day job. You never stop going to therapy. You never stop. I don't know many therapists who would say, you know what, you're good. They want to see you the next week, the next week, the next week, the next week, the next week. That might be one of the working definitions of a religion. Or a scam. I'll leave that alone. Are you following me? Therapy, I've had therapy. I've been a part of therapy. I'm not knocking it. I'm telling you it's a thin soup. It's thin soup. It's thin. It's watery. I rambled a little bit on that, but I think it was probably pretty good. Number 4, can somebody read 4 for us?
The structure of every adult psyche is determined by how successful they navigate in many stages of maturity. All people pass from infancy to early childhood. The very young child's coming to terms with his or her love of dependency on and fear of the parent provides a template for all people, norms and attitudes toward authority. Crudely put, everyone spends the rest of their life acting out a role in a script written in their early years. And then the Christian tree, God has set eternity into the hearts of man. All men are restless without him. And God is the ultimate judge of a fruitful human life, not men.
All right. Do we have a response to this?
Word is essentially saying that your life is the cards that you were.
Your life is the cards you were dealt. Okay, good. Are Christians disagreeing that there are basic childhood developments that take place in humans' lives? Are we saying that that's not true? No, a toddler thinks concretely. An infant, if you do peekaboo with an infant, by the way, if you've ever seen these videos, owners will do it with their pets as well. But if you've ever like hidden behind a blanket with an infant, what does the infant think? You've gone away. And every single time you do that, they go, right? Because for that infant, you're gone, right? And then you drop the thing and the infant goes, every single time, as if you can do that all day. And every time but you probably shouldn't, because that's creeping the kid out, just so you know. Are Christians denying basic development of humans? Are we denying that? No. What are we saying? Who said the first thing back there? Was it Wilson or Caleb? Just then. Caleb, Wilson, what are we saying? We're not denying human development. What are we saying?
We're saying that, especially what it says before, God is
do we transcend our programming, yes or no? Are you with me? I've said this all the time. Y'all know I like Legos. Did y'all know I like Legos? Do you understand if you're playing with Legos, everything's a brick? Do you understand that? Everything's a Lego? Can you make just about anything out of Legos? The answer is yes. Yes, you can. You can make almost anything out of Legos. But guess what? Every individual piece is what? A Lego. Are you made from carbon? Yes or no? The Bible says, from dust you were created, and to dust you shall return. That's pretty good science, if you ask me, for an ancient book. You are carbon-based life. Guess what? So are dogs. So are chimpanzees. So are snakes. We're all carbon-based life. So what? Are you more than that? Are you more than that? So am I. Psychology won't tell you that. Who will? The God of creation. The God of creation will say, when you were a baby, you did think your adult went away. Congratulations, you're human. You're human. You're so much more. You're so much more. You're so much more. You're so much more. What is man that you are mindful of him? You made him a little lower than the angels and set eternity in his hearts. We're idiosyncratic and universal. Right? Idiosyncratic, and there is a universe inside each and every one of us. My favorite term to describe another human being, I've only been doing this for about 10 years now. My favorite word to describe another human, delightful. You know where I got that? My Creator, who said He delights in us. We're so much more. We're so much more than psychology can even scratch at. So why would I view myself in this never-ending stream of therapy to solve? They're not even there to solve anything. They're there to just listen and say, yeah, it sounds like that's exactly where you are. Okay, number 5. Let's close this up. The goal of psychoanalytic therapy is to turn the patients. Keep in mind, the person who wrote this summary loves Freud. This is not an attack on Freud. These 5 summaries were found by me of someone who is pushing Freudian psychoanalysis. Do you understand that? This is not an attack on Freud. This is a fair summary of Freud. Number 5, the goal of psychoanalytic therapy is to turn the patient's neurotic misery into common unhappiness. What's the goal? Common unhappiness. Freud did not think that abundant life was possible for the human. He just did not. He did not. By the way, and this is worth knowing, when there was a very famous study on sexual behavior. Brother Jeffrey, do you recall it in the 40s or 50s? Do you remember the names? Very famous sex study. Lots of data. Kinsey? Yes. Was there another name with him? Kinsey and? That's the one that I'm thinking of. Is that also one? We're going to say it's both for the purpose. Okay, yeah. But so there were famous sex studies done in the 40s and 50s, 60s. They took prisoners and deviants to pull a lot of the data from. Does that ring a bell for some of this?
I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah. They did not take the population as a whole to draw their statistics from. They took prisoners, deviants, those outside the norm. What kind of data do you think they got? skewed data. Do you know who Freud did most of his psychological research on? Those who had great psychological illness. The man spent his life studying those who had the greatest psychological ills. Does that sound scientific to you? To come up with a basis for psychology of all of humanity? So when Freud says something like, the best we're hoping for is an uncommon happiness, you know what, Freud? I'm gonna tap out. I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna go this direction. Because all of your summation, all of your data, all of your understanding of the human existence is very skewed in one arena only. So, again, we're not taking pot shots. Those are realities. 5, Christ, so under the Christian tree, Christ provides abundance, life, joy, blessings, and fruitfulness. Christianity is the only thing I know of. I find this remarkable. I mean, I'm sure one can find. Well, let me back up and say it this way. In Christianity, you may suffer in your physical human existence and have great joy. In other worldviews, you can have success, health, wealth, etc., 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 and be absolutely miserable. So there's got to be something going on with the worldview of Christianity in which anyone, any human, I've known people who were paraplegics who had more joy than Olympic level athletes who followed the worldview of naturalism, transcendentalism. I've known paraplegics with more personal, abundant joy. So, worldview matters. I've said that before. Worldview matters. Psychology is the study of what it means to be human. I am not opposed to you seeking therapy. I'm not opposed to you seeking counsel. I'm not opposed to you seeking help, support, mental health, etc., etc., etc. Nowhere in today did you hear me say, never go to counseling. Nowhere in here today did you hear me say, don't get therapy. What you did hear me to say is, if you go to someone who holds a naturalistic worldview, you will get exactly what you paid for. And if you go to someone with a biblical worldview, a Christian worldview, you will get exactly what you paid for. Final comments or questions from anybody? Yes, ma'am.
I think the naturalism, number 3 is contradiction to the number 1, because if you are human, you assume human beings are animal. You should won't have the mental health issue, because you are animal, you don't have soul. So you won't have any kind of problem, because animals follow their animal instinct. They don't care about you feel happy or you feel sad, you just follow whatever you want. So I kind of feel like it's a very big contradiction to the.
Yeah.
They are trying to assume, people are animals.
Thank you for that.
I'm just thinking the last point, comparing the goal of at best being unhappy and then dying compared to eternal bliss with the Savior.
Yeah. It's an absurd comparison, isn't it? What boggles my mind, it really truly does, is the tools. Well, I'm going to speak plain on this. I want y'all to hear this plainly. I shared with y'all that for 2 years I studied psychoanalysis. I shouldn't say studied. I was trained under a student of Freud, Jacques Lacan. I told this group this. Sigmund Freud had 2 disciples. One was Carl Jung. One was Jacques Lacan. Those were his two great disciples, and those two men created schools of thought. Jacques Lacan was the one that I was trained under, and he would argue and say that he was the true disciple of Freud. His psychoanalysis is still being used to this day, some 100 years later. He mostly did what he did in the 60s, but Freud earlier. So, and I'm going to close with this. There's no there. There's no substance in that psychology. There's nothing there. You can spend hours and days and weeks and months and years with these principles, and you can spend many, many tears, but nowhere in that therapy, nowhere in that training will you find any answers or solutions to the problem of what it means to be human. What you will hear again and again and again is, this is what it is. This is what it means. This is all there is. That's what you'll hear. And any solutions, Brother Jeffrey, to your point, any solutions that you're actually hearing are in contradiction to everything you're being taught. So if someone tells you, but we're going to find a way to help you feel better or get you better, that didn't come from that principle. Because in the principle, there was nothing to draw from. Because the principle comes back to, this is all there is. This is all there is. But what about what I should do? There is no should. How could I possibly become a better human? Why would you want to? Then what? Those are the kind of questions you'll get. So in Christianity, Christ says, come follow me. Is that not the most beautiful thing you've ever did here, by the way? Jesus literally will say to any human, hey, come follow me. Isn't that beautiful? I can make sense of that. Psychoanalysis says you're an animal, you have instincts, you have things you want, things you want, things you want, things you want. You will find them, you will do them. Then what? That's about it. Christ says, come follow me. Come follow me. Isn't that delightful? One's appealing. One's utterly depressing. Final words, comments, or questions? I'm not anti-counseling. I'm a pretty good counselor if you need an ear. Yes, Sister Shelley, go ahead.
Yeah, in our discussion on the second question, we talk about the standard life, and the society is the society's standard. I think Sister Priscilla made the point that according to Florian, the standard of the society is the standard people need to live.
Yeah, right.
But
and the society is sick.
Yeah, it's sick. But for our Christian brothers and sisters, we help each other out, we lift each other up, and hold each other accountable according to God's standard. So it's very different.
Amen. Sister Lai.
Yes, it's not. It's kind of related to the psychology. Our coming retreat, the speaker. He's a practice psychologist. He's
right.
The doctor. But then in his online talk, he said, modern psychology, just like you mentioned, is religious.
Right. That's right.
And really, psychology won't help you. Just like you come here every week, give you some feeling better throughout your gut. But the thing is, real healing is the Jesus Christ. That's why he learned. He went to the seminary to learn the truth, and his main purpose is care about the people.
Yeah.
And the topic is really good help us. So encourage all of you register for.
Absolutely. Register for the conference.
Yeah, that's about biblical psychology.
Okay, so let me put one more summation because I want to make sure you hear me very carefully. This unit, today's lecture was on psychology as one of the fruits of worldview. Let me repeat myself. I'm not telling you not to ever go to counseling or ever have therapy. Did you hear me say that? What I'm saying to you is the type of therapy, the type of counseling you receive is completely dependent on the worldview of the person who's helping you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you go to a naturalist therapist, a naturalist counselor, you are going to get exactly what you paid for, which is a naturalist worldview. Right? And if you go to a Christian counselor, a Christian therapist who is using biblical principles, Christian principles, then you will get exactly that type of worldview therapy and counseling. Okay? Therapy is only as good as the person sitting across from you. You just write that down. Your counseling, your therapy is only as good as the person who's in the room with you. That's it. Okay? So we're not anti-psychology for this lecture, but what we are saying is buyer beware, because so much of it is garbage. So much of it is garbage. Yes, ma'am?
I don't know whether my analogy is appropriate or not.
Do it.
I feel like psychoanalysis or therapy is almost like you have a fever, so you take some Tylenol, then you fix the fever. But you are not really knowing why
you have a fever. Yeah.
So for, I guess, biblical counseling is more
the root cause.
the root of the
That's right. And I agree with you, Sister Meow. We'll close with what you're saying. So let's extend that just a little bit. So the naturalist psychologist would never get to the root. Why? Because at the end of the day, they don't really care. It's just who you are. It's part of who you are, right? If you're getting different answers from that counselor, they're being a hypocrite. They're not living out of naturalism. They're actually they're creating a reason. They're creating a meaning. But in the naturalist lens, there's not a meaning there.
Just another analogy. I heard a pastor say that in this sort of naturalistic psychoanalysis, it's like if you have a car, then you see like that red light. It's like there's a problem, a check engine or something. I've only been driving for a short time.
Sure.
But, like, there's a red light apparently that tells you there's something wrong with the car. And what the psychology, non-Christian psychology does, is it says, oh, we can address that. We know how to make that